Calling this meeting to order, Environment and Energy Stewardship Subcommittee. Happy Friday. First two items on the agenda are approval of the agenda and minutes of the previous meeting.
Make a motion to approve the agenda and approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
This is Meg. I'll second.
Awesome. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Fantastic. Public comment. We decided last time to do a hybrid, right? We decided.
Yes, that's correct.
Don't have anyone
Okay.
lined up online.
Okay, great. Nobody in the room. Loitering, okay. I was certain that Brownie and Terry would be here by the Okay. Let's give it a minute.
Yeah.
Let's give it a minute. I think they'll want to hear the
Chicken
the
short.
intro. Yeah, they'll want to hear the intro to this meeting. And so if I understand correctly, perhaps unlike previous meetings, this is being recorded, right?
Yes, and it's live streamed on Facebook.
It is live streamed right now on YouTube.
Okay.
Oh,
Best-
yes, as well. Very good.
Sure. And that's best identified to the room by the red circle at the top left. Is that,
Actually, that's just the team's recording,
Okay.
but I am live streaming.
okay, cool.
Wait.
She said, so, cool. Okay. Brett, number 4, the first discussion item.
And highly productive.
Uh, They're about to discuss the Greenway bond criteria. I figured Terry wanted to hear that. So.
Jill, you think we share your own presentation? Yeah, I was just pulling it. Okay.
Yeah, let's give her a second.
Congrats on the compliment, y'all.
We approved it, yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. What was that? Last one was 2012.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Give them a call. And then you have one.
It was like 12.
Oh, very comprehensive.
It was very.
Oh, okay.
Let's not mess it up.
Okay. We can proceed. Greenway's bond criteria. Jill and Tom, take it away.
Thank you. So I think I've met most of you, but my name is Jill Carter and I am the project manager for the open space bond. And Thomas and I are here today. To share the proposed evaluation criteria for Greenway's projects to be funded through this bond. As a quick refresher, so the open space bond does allocate $30 million towards 3 types of projects, being conservation easements, passive recreation lands, and greenways. Each of these project types will be functioning under its own application process where staff will receive and review proposals projects. An advisory board for each component will review those proposals and select which ones they'd like to recommend to move forward. And then ultimately the commissioners will select which projects to fund. For conservation easements, this is actually something that we've been doing in the county for a long time. So we have a fairly well-established process for that project selection. That process has been revised to meet the goals of the bond. But for passive recreation lands and greenways, we do not have a process in place. So we are currently following this process you see to the right to develop or to design how we want to allocate these funds for those 2 project types. And currently we are in the process of developing the evaluation criteria and bringing it for approval. So on a quick status update, the evaluation criteria for conservation easements was actually adopted by the commissioners on May 2nd, which will allow us to move forward with project selection. And we anticipate that we will be able to select the first project to receive funding this summer. Passive recreation, we are currently in a public engagement process whereby we've been meeting with community partners and the larger public to kind of set the vision for what passive recreation lands should look like, as well as get their feedback on draft criteria. that conversation will inform how we refine the criteria, which we will be bringing before this subcommittee as well as the commissioners this summer. And then we will be able to move into the development of the RFP and the application. And then finally, greenways. We have already completed a similar public engagement process as what we're doing right now for passive recreation. We met with our advisory board several times, as well as key community partners and the larger public to get their input. We refined that criteria accordingly, and it was approved by our Recreation Advisory Board. So we are now sharing it with this subcommittee to get additional feedback, as well as ideally have this criteria approved before we go to the full commission. And then we will be able to move into pre-development for the 3 shovel-ready projects. So as you can see, we do anticipate that all of those evaluation criteria for the 3 project types will be able to be completed by the end of this summer.
That's the very basic question.
Sure.
What is passive recreation?
That is a good question. So passive recreation land is lands that are compatible with conservation efforts as well as recreation. And the recreation that can take place on those lands has to place minimal stress on the natural resources.
It's like hiking.
Things like hiking,
Okay.
things like non-motorized biking or wildlife viewing.
I want nature-based.
Okay.
And these lands also have very minimal development on them, so you're not going to see like a large ballpark or something like that on passive recreation lands. You might see some trail development or a very low impact bathroom, that, but not huge facilities and structures. Yeah. So with that, I can pass it to Thomas to give some quick.
Yeah, so I'm Thomas Gold. I'm the relatively new principal park planner here at Loncombe County. I have not met everyone in this room yet, so hello, glad to meet you. Before we started talking about the Greenway criteria specifically, I did want to provide a little bit of context. I think this context will help us understand some of the criteria themselves, but also help us understand kind of what I think we can accomplish with the Greenway open space bond funds. So with that being said, there are really 2 different ways you can fund Greenway projects. You can locally fund them, in which the local government is on the hook for essentially 100% of the cost of the Greenway. They can apply for local grants and such to be included in that, but you're mainly dealing with local government funds through their budget. There are a lot fewer restrictions and regulations when you do it this way, which leads to a quicker process from planning through to complete construction. And those projects can be locally prioritized. And then the second way that projects are funded are actually through the MPO. This involves an 80-20 split between state and federal funds and a required local match to meet those funds. With this particular method of funding, there's a lot more regulations that are tied to state and federal approvals, all done through the NCDOT. This projects funded in this manner are much more lengthy in their approvals that are required to move from one phase to the next. So the overall construction, or from planning through to complete construction, is much lengthier in time. And these particular projects are prioritized by the STIP and the MPO's MTP, the State Transportation Improvement Program. So moving on to kind of our current shovel-ready projects that we have going on in the county right now. We have the Highway 251 section of the Woodfin Greenway, the Beaver Dam Creek section of the Woodfin Greenway, and then the Inca Heritage Trail, which is part of the Humphrey Creek Greenway. These projects predated me here at the county by many years. So a lot of, and these are all funded through the MPO. So when they were funded through the MPO, their project cost estimates were a lot lower than what they are now. So it is estimated that at current cost estimates put that we're going to need about $5 million in Greenway bond funds to see these projects through to completion. They currently are scheduled to be complete in the 4th quarter of 2025. However, both of these kind of things can change. Both the budget and the timeline can change based on current market volatility, as well as kind of that approval process and the delays that we're experiencing getting those approvals with NCDOT. So we started to do some of the math here. We have a $30 million open space bond. It's split 3 ways between land conservation, greenways, and passive recreation lands. Then on top of that, You have $5 million that are going to be needed to go towards these greenway, shovel-ready greenway projects. And then if you add on top of that, the current cost estimates or projections for greenway projects to be completed within our region are about $3.5 million per mile. You start to realize some of the implications of kind of the situation we're in when we're talking about what we can accomplish with these greenway bond funds. So with that kind of as the context and setting the table, we'll start talking about the greenway criteria themselves. So as Jill mentioned, generating the greenway criteria has been a much different process than that of the land conservation process, just because we do not currently have a process in place for how to select greenway projects in the county. So we knew that we wanted this to involve quite a robust public engagement campaign in generating these particular criteria. So we knew there were some certain groups that we wanted to engage. Obviously, the general public, and then there was stakeholder organizations that were really associated with greenways in our community. So organizations like Connect Buncombe, Connect Inca, but also other municipalities throughout the county. So, because they could technically apply for our bond funds as well. And then organizations like Riverlink and Mountain True as well. And then we also wanted to engage our Recreation Advisory Board. Kind of the ways that we wanted to do this was through public meetings, our existing advisory board meetings. We did create an online survey on our public input page for greenways. And then we also wanted to maintain an open dialogue through email correspondence as well with the public and our stakeholders. So kind of how the process unraveled is we did start this process in January of this year, in which staff drafted our initial 7 criteria. We took that to our Recreation Advisory Board in February. We revised the criteria based on their impact or input, sorry. And then we took that to our stakeholders and the public with our stakeholder and public meetings in March. March is also when our public or our survey went live online on our public input page. So in April, what we really spent that month doing is kind of synthesizing and analyzing kind of all of that feedback that we received, and then refining the criteria based on the input that we received, and then taking that to our Recreation Advisory Board earlier this month. And then obviously we're before you here today, and we hope to present this greenway criteria to Commission in June. So this is the greenway criteria as it ended up based on all the input we received. So we have 12 total criteria now, evolving from 7 initial. We split this into 2 different categories. We have qualifying weighted criteria, and you'll notice that some of these criteria actually cross categories here. So you'll see leveraging of bond funds, both in the qualifying criteria and in the weighted criteria, as well as feasibility. Feasibility is in both. One other thing to note on this particular slide is you'll see the percentage weights associated with each of the weighted criteria. And those directly reflect the importance, the level of importance kind of feedback that we received from the general public.
Can you go back just a second?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Let's look at that just a little bit.
Yeah. When you say environmental impact, you mean how destructive would it be to build a greenway, or would it?
Yeah, and I'm gonna get into
pros and cons, or
Yep, I'm going to get into each of the kind of the specifics of each of these. Yeah, so with our qualifying criteria, like I said, we have 4, and they're yes/no questions. And essentially, the project will have to answer yes to each of these questions in order to qualify for open space bond funds. So first, as kind of I outlined in the context, we're really going to need to leverage these bond funds in order to make a greater impact. So will the bond funds be leveraged effectively using other sources? Yes or no? Yes, you can move on. Project scheduling and timeline. So as you all know, there is a timeline that's established by the bonds. So we need these projects to be completed within those bond requirements.
Remind me those timelines.
It's 7 years, yeah, 7 years with the option to extend to 10.
So getting NPO money, adding new projects, it's very unlikely that it will be funded and constructed in 10 years given the NPO timeline, right?
There are current projects, but yes, it is going to be very,
Yeah,
very
to
difficult.
get any new projects in the queue,
Correct.
so that won't be a major funding source for us,
What won't be?
the NPO.
If we're not using NPO projects, then we're essentially going to be paying full price for the greenways that cost 3.5 million per mile.
Right.
Yeah.
So seems like we're in a pickle because of the
Correct.
NPO's timeline.
Correct. So the next criteria is the feasibility study complete. There are a number of feasibility studies out there already, so we know that some kind of projects that are on the table and in these systems, as you mentioned, already do have feasibility studies complete. However, there are projects out there that do not have those. So we're recommending that people that would be applying for these funds now start those feasibility studies. And then geographic location, is the project located within Buncombe County? It's our intention that Buncombe County open space bond funds will be spent on projects in Buncombe County. We realize that some of these projects may actually cross county lines, and we're totally okay with that. However, the part of the project that will be funded with our open space bond funds needs to be located within. All right, so moving on to some of the weighted criteria. Kind of the first one we have here is connectivity. And with connectivity, what we were really hearing is that people really want greenways to connect to other greenways, but they really want greenways to connect communities to other things as well. They want greenways to connect communities to communities, communities to other public services, commerce, and jobs. And really kind of the overarching theme of why this connection was so important is people really want greenways to provide connections that are alternative methods for transportation so that they can reduce their number of vehicular trips to and from places, and therefore reducing carbon emissions. Which transitions well into our next kind of criteria, which is environmental impact. Kind of the main theme we've heard in our feedback on this particular criteria is that not only do people want to see that greenway projects reduce the environmental impact, negative environmental impact, but also whenever the opportunity presents itself, that these projects actually take advantage of those opportunities to have a positive impact on the environment. So some of the key themes that we kind of heard were minimizing stormwater impact, respecting sensitive ecosystems and wildlife habitat, ensuring greenways have proper land management plans after they're constructed. The next criteria we have is accessibility. And when we're talking about accessibility for greenway projects, we're really talking about three different types of accessibility that we heard in our feedback. One is kind of your standard. We want to make sure that the greenway trailheads, transitions to and from kind of the multimodal transit system are all designed for ADA accessibility. The second kind of component of the accessibility is people wanted to make sure that these greenway projects and open space projects in general were geographically located throughout the community so that traditionally underserved communities had access to them. And then the third component is that people wanted to make sure that the greenways were designed and built in a safe and welcoming manner. Because if you don't do that, you might be unintentionally excluding certain demographics from their use. The next kind of component is that feasibility. As mentioned previously, in the qualifying criteria, we're requiring a feasibility study complete. But as we all probably understand, all feasibility studies are not equal. So we're adding a separate layer on top of that. And what we really want to do with this particular criteria is take a really in-depth look at natural and man-made opportunities and constraints along the corridors. Also, we need to make sure that we have hyperlocal support for the greenway projects. So in Buncombe County, we do not exercise eminent domain in order to get greenway projects completed. So we have to work with willing landowners in order to acquire easements and right-of-way in order to get the greenways built. And then third, for the feasibility, again, we want to make sure that these projects can be delivered within the timeline.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is that an official policy of the county? Because I've heard different things on this point over the years. I just want to clarify. Is that an officially adopted policy, or is it just kind of the way we think about it, or where does that stand?
Meaning the not wanting to.
That the county would never
Never
use
do.
eminent domain?
I don't think it's an official policy. I think
Okay,
it's a
well-
practice. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you guys know something in writing.
I was told it was moving.
I think it's unclear, because
Yeah.
different, it gets talked about as like the policy, or it gets talked about as, well, that's not a policy, it's
Yeah.
just the way we think about it.
I don't know why, I mean, yeah, it's not a policy that's written somewhere. It's just
Yeah.
something that's been generally.
I think when the county adopted the first Greenway plans before I was on the commission, like back in 2011 or thereabouts. I think the county commissioners, because it was, there was some controversial nature to it at the time. Greenways was a crazy new idea. I think people said, we'll never use eminent domain, to kind of get people settled down.
Said it out loud.
But I don't know if it was ever voted on, but it was said out loud. But I guess I would just share, I mean, certainly I think it should be a tool of last resort. But, if there's just some project that the community really wants to see happen, and you get 9 different property owners to do easements and stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the day, would we not do a project that would be very compelling and benefit our whole community, because one property owner wouldn't give you 50 feet of easement along the edge of their property? Would we really not do that? That doesn't seem like a responsible position or policy for us to have going forward. We would never have that same policy when it comes to other transportation projects, right? Like, we just wouldn't, like roads, things get built, so because I do hear that, I think maybe there should just be sort of some internal discussion around it. If it's not an officially adopted policy, maybe there's no need to have one, but I would encourage us to think about it as sort of a tool of last resort, as opposed to, we would never do it. And I hope we don't ever have to do it, but if we did, it's something that shouldn't be off the table. People still get paid fair market value for their easement or whatever, right? So it's not like the land's being taken without compensation.
Correct. And the one counter, I'm not disagreeing with you at all, but the one counter I have heard to that is, if you are seeking bond funds for Greenway development, then oftentimes that can turn people off to the bond. Because what if it's my land next that the government pays? So that's the one counter I've heard to that argument. So just for thought in the discussion. Yeah. So the next criteria we have is, we want these projects to be currently identified as a countywide need, opportunity, and priority. And kind of how we define that is that the projects need to be identified within an existing municipal, county, region, or state trail or Greenway master plan. Now, we do realize that our current Greenway master plan was last completed in 2012. Obviously, a lot has happened development-wise in this county since 2012, so there's been some new needs and opportunities that have arisen since 2012. So projects can be presented to county staff and our Recreation Advisory Board for consideration as a new countywide need as well. Equity is our next component, and we're really talking about 3 different things when we're talking about equity here. Some of which you've already heard in kind of the accessibility component as well. But we're really talking about people wanting projects to involve traditionally underserved communities in the county, even from the planning and feasibility stages of the projects. We're talking about people wanting projects that directly serve these particular communities. We're talking about people wanting to make sure that access is ensured to the projects through proper design that's designed for safety and proper management of the project, so that all feel welcome on this particular projects.
I have some questions on that one.
Sure.
Whether it's true or not, I hear the conversation about perceived fear of amenities like this with going into low-income communities, providing a lot of opportunities, and then people getting priced out of living there. And so I wonder, or I don't know how to necessarily square that at the city. We just do a lot of community engagement in those places, but I wonder if there's a lens of community demand, or like just really making sure that there's the ask of like, what table has been set before this project comes to us, because it can really have some negative repercussions, not only in it being a welcome amenity or not, but also in potential gentrification, whether it's always true or not, that's something I think to be sensitive about. And I guess, yeah, community engagement inclusion throughout the design process would likely get there. Just want to raise that flag.
Can you just really quickly click back to the previous one? Sorry, one more. Accessibility. Like, I'm thinking more accessibility. So I get, okay, you can go back. It's just that I think there are several bullets in each of these that are the same. And maybe that's fine, but I don't know, I mean, I don't know if that means we're then meeting several counties, we're like double counting in some ways, so it may just be something to look at, like about safety and the thing about serving underserved. And so
I don't think there's a correlation between each bullet and the exact weight, just so you know, that's
Yeah.
helpful.
okay.
Yeah, so how these things are determined in the evaluation process will largely be hashed out in the design of the application, but also the advisory board will be responsible for helping us parse out these nuances and giving a more, I guess, subjective, or not subjective, but looking at these more complicated comparisons between projects and saying, okay, these are the things we want to consider when thinking about equity and things we want to consider when thinking about accessibility. How does this project compare on the accessibility side or the equity side, and what points do we want to give it based on that?
Like what Maggie made is like incredibly important, necessarily for identifying our criteria, but like, yeah, like we've had communities reject sidewalk money because they fear someone would want to live there, which is just
We found
so sad and insane.
greenways eliciting a reaction.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know, like we've made these basic things and like the safeness of your ability to leave your property and go to an adjacent one so rare and scarce that people are afraid of it. So yeah, I don't know. I guess the only point I would think making to this purpose and the future committee that looks at it is like, I would want to empower them to like that holistically and like weight the concerns of that community with like,
Heaviness.
well, yeah, but also like to say, well, everyone should have sidewalks. You know, they really like walk somewhere. We're really gonna. It's like to say to a certain neighborhood, no, yeah, well, it's not.
It's like a weird inverse of not in my backyard. What I found is.
I want to empower, sorry, I want to empower them to weigh it, but then also maybe push back.
I mean, ultimately, you all aren't gonna develop these projects, right? They're gonna come to you and you'll fund them, right?
We can do both.
A bit of both. Well, all is to say, like.
I've got to keep in mind, so. I throw out there.
I think the community engagement process and the trust is a big part of this, so it just depends. I hear what you're saying of like, do we want to let fear keep people out, but it's just an area of experiences we've had, intentions, and the intention of serving disadvantaged communities and disadvantaged communities being like, I don't want your help.
Mhm.
So you just have to be thoughtful in the process, I find.
It's definitely, yeah, I mean, it's like, especially like opposition sidewalks, it's kind of like, it's hard to kind of like wrap your brain around.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, I think that the community engagement around stuff is good. And I do think you gotta, as sort of hard to kind of support the notion in a way as it is, you know, I think you still have to hear it, right? Like, in the reality is we have finite dollars. We don't have dollars to put greenways and sidewalks everywhere. So if a place doesn't want them, like, let's put them where they do, right? So, I mean, I think you do have to listen, and even if you don't really agree, you know, I think, and part of it is, you know, is that the gentrification stuff is real, right? Like, neighborhoods really do get gentrified. So I think there might be larger community strategies we have to address gentrification, because it's not being primarily driven by sidewalks and greenways, but there is real research that shows these kind of amenities can accelerate it. So it's not a completely substantiveless concern that these neighborhoods and residents share too. So,
And how meta do you want to get when you're thinking about equity and public money, right? Because ultimately, if you're having communities who fear this as gentrification, so you're like, cool, you're not first in line, we'll go to the first in line. We'll make some guesses about the communities that are first in line and what their current status is, their property taxes, et cetera. And so I think you all, my observation is, are doing a good job applying an equity lens across your institution at large. And so it's just worth bringing up this conversation that there can be some contradictions and some challenges as the community evolves and as gentrification comes up. So I think seeing the bullets that you have here are good flags for the discussion of where we at, what's the community want, but I anticipate that will come up a lot. And, you'll just have to walk carefully.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did want to.
so I'm glad we solved that issue.
Well, let's use-
I solved it. We put that.
I'm glad we put the video. Yeah, so that's good. Well, yeah, this is very helpful because as we'll talk about in next steps, once the criteria is adopted, we do want to do a public education campaign around greenways. And the way we've been thinking about it so far is more on the talking about the process for greenways so that we can set reasonable expectations. But I think your point is an important one that we should include in that process so that the community can understand the potential impact of a greenway project in their neighborhood and what that means and could mean for the future, so that when we go back and have these community engagement, they're fully informed and know what they're potentially getting into. So thank you. That is very helpful for that.
Oh, okay. Sorry. All right, so as previously stated, leveraging was a qualifying criteria, but also we wanted to further that kind of discussion as well. So, and included in this particular criteria is project costs as well. So not only are we going to be asking the question, are the bond funds leveraged, but at what rate are they leveraged? So we would like to give preference to projects that were able to leverage bond funds at a greater rate than others potentially. We also want to make sure that all of our project cost estimates are up to date with those kind of existing feasibility studies out there, some that have sat on the shelf for quite a few years. They have project cost estimates associated with them, but those would be pretty outdated at this point, given construction cost increases that we've seen over the last couple of years. So we want to make sure that not only are those project costs up to date, but also that they include a planning level contingency. And then we also want to make sure that these projects are fully utilizing grant opportunities that might be available to them through some of the sources you see listed here. In addition to the MPO, the TBDF part of the Land and Water Trust Fund. And then finally, we have safety. So kind of baked into everything that greenway designers do, there's a safety component to it all. Greenway designers who are civil engineers and landscape architects basically have to adhere to the AASHTO bike guide in order to get their projects approved. But what we've really heard from the community is that they would like to prioritize projects that went a little bit above and beyond kind of those safety standards and included some of the things that you see mentioned here, such as emergency call kiosks. They really wanted to make sure that those post-construction maintenance plans and litter management plans were in place. And then public informational campaigns were huge as well for greenway etiquette, since our community does seem to have a growing kind of greenway network with different types of stuff, and just learning who has right of way in which situation on a cycle track versus a multimodal path and such. So that was the safety component. And like Jill said, we did bring this to the Recreation Advisory Board earlier this month, and they did vote for recommendation of this greenway. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jill.
Could I?
Sure.
one of the criteria was probably around like connectivity.
The first one.
Yeah, could we go back? I just want to see, 'cause, is there value, okay, so connecting to other trails, it's basically saying like, this one is 20%, so that's very important if you're waiting, and then there's a long list here of how it could be connecting, right? And so that'll be maybe the more nuanced or subjective part in the decision point, because, and I wonder, right now, it looks like there's a menu of all the different ways that you could be connecting, but is there value in being more strategic and picking one of these? I don't know. I guess it's kind of, what is the ultimate goal of what we're doing here? And if you only have so much money, you could still have a very disconnected, scattershot greenway system if connectivity is so subjective on so many different bullets. And I don't know if I have one that I feel like it should be to other greenways in the regional trail system, but the impact you're still gonna have is not a network. If connectivity can be valued along so many different ways.
I can speak to that a little bit. It's not gonna be a complete answer to it, but the way I view kind of greenways in Buncombe County right now is you're kind of going along kind of like path of least resistance projects. So right now, when we get projects, they're not necessarily gonna connect to other greenways in the moment. But, so I'm from Wake County, and I kind of grew up in Wake County, and I saw them 20 years ago essentially have kind of the system that we have here, in which they were just putting greenways that didn't necessarily connect to other greenways in the moment, but now that system is starting to really connect because people can kind of
Right.
see those things. So I envision us now in the kind of path of least resistance, get the greenways in the ground, as long as they kind of align with the overall vision laid out in some of these county and regional master plans.
And what I'm saying is, do we want to wait 20 years to get the connectivity, or is now a time to be more strategic? As it was, what is the outcome we want? I think about your comp plan and your housing needs. I think greenways are fun, but I think greenways have a really high value for transportation also. And in the city, we have scattershot network, and it's really hard to close those gaps. And I understand path of least resistance. I know why we do it. It's like, gosh, you want to hold out on a perfect line? No. But I think this is a real strategic question to think about as you start this program. What will scattershot get us? What is the ultimate benefit? And if the ultimate benefit is,
I want to clarify a point that I made, because I'm not advocating for scattershot like approach. I'm saying that those projects that are the easiest that align with the master plan, so that, you know, the connectivity does happen in future days. I'm not advocating for an approach where you're not looking at the big picture. Just want a point of clarification there.
I hear you. I apologize to put those words in your mouth. I didn't mean to. I just said, like, we have used our plan systems in path of least resistance, and we don't have the connectivity to get us towards road shift, which I think to me is important in my community.
I think
And it
this,
seems like now's the time to talk through.
feel like this gives us the flexibility that we need with there, right? Because they're gonna be able to look at this big plan, to your point, but this gives them some flexibility in that, because the reality, as was pointed out at the very beginning, we're gonna be lucky if it was only $5 million to finish those other two projects that we've already said, right?
How much are we actually going to spend on greenways out of the bond funds?
10.
10, so there's only
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
So you're looking at like, yeah.
The question is like, we're going through all this process, there's no money to do this. Like, you're talking about a mile or two of greenway, right? Why don't we just pick which mile or two we're gonna do and do that?
Mhm.
And then once we've done that, because otherwise, if we're coming with a process for something that doesn't have, there's no funding to do, right? So do we actually know which mile or two of additional greenway we're gonna do? We don't.
I mean, that's the point of the RFP process, to see which one we would do.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is.
2 miles, that's what we're talking about here.
It's a point of discussion.
Because it seems like, you know, we're talking about this vision thing, but it's like, we're talking about like 8 another project somewhere, right?
Or it's like setting a foundation for a greenway program that's. really
Exactly,
funded in a
yes.
small way.
Exactly. I think, you know, it's the long-term vision of, you know, achieving the total picture that Thomas is talking about. And so this is just the setting that foundation.
There is so that's kind of why I set it up in the beginning like I did, because there is hey, let's just do the 1 or 2 mile kind of greenway, call it a day. But then there is also the approach where we can use whatever money we have left over for applicants to meet that 20% match for NPO projects. But as was pointed out, you're going to be beholden to projects that are already on their list, essentially to get it done within our timeline established by the bond.
So I just want to go back to Maggie's point for a minute, because I think that's so important. So I lived in Boulder, Colorado for 15 years, and what an amazing greenway system. And actually what it resulted in was a huge number of people who biked to work or walked to work, where it really had a major impact. And so anyway, I just think that's so important. And I wonder if we are only going to do a mile or two, you know, can we look at the map of the existing greenways? Can we, you know, and figure out where is that mile or two that would create the most for the buck in terms of connectivity that actually allow people to commute and to move? Because then it's just like, it's a small thing, but it starts to actually demonstrate the potential and then maybe build more and more enthusiasm to make that more.
But are we talking about multimodal infrastructure here? Or when we talk about these greenway projects? Because I think about like bike lanes and stuff like that as sort of a different category of stuff than what we're talking about right now. But are they different, or is that kind of part of this process too? Because we could probably build a lot of bike lanes and stuff for vastly cheaper than $3.5 million a mile, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've traditionally been thinking about this as kind of that multi-use path that's separated from automobiles.
Yeah, off-road.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so, I mean, within the NPO and the STIP, I mean, there's projects that have both, actually. There's projects that are that separated path, but then there's also projects that are bike lanes, cycle tracks and stuff like that.
So Thomas, is the 3.5 million if we didn't have any other funding? That would be like,
No, that's even on our current projects right now. If we average those out, it's a little over actually 3.5 million per mile to actually build the current projects that we're building.
But that's like the total cost.
total cost, so it's not in addition to grant funds, that would be total cost.
Yeah, that's total cost. So that's preliminary engineering, right-of-way acquisition, and construction of the projects.
And then the other thing I think that's important to remember is that Parks and Rec is beginning their master plan process that will likely take 18 months to 2 years. This likely won't come to fruition until 2026 because of finishing those other ones. So by then, the master plan may be able to influence the projects better to get to what you're speaking about, you know, about like connectivity, like what is the existing, what would be the biggest bang for your buck on a mile if you could get it? There'll be more information.
I guess just like to these questions, so I wonder, that is this process, we're really kind of asking the question, like, how do we make Buncombe County more bicycle and pedestrian safe? I think that's a great question. But when we think about like, let's go plan some greenway, allocation of greenway funds, I don't feel like that is, I feel like it's kind of part of the discussion, but I don't feel like that's the primary focus. If we were saying like, how do we make Ashland more bicycle and pedestrian safety, it would be a different set of things that would likely be emerging than what I think is going to emerge through this. How do we allocate greenway bond fund process? It's just my feeling, but I don't know if I'm right about that.
I think that was a good question, is like, what is the ultimate goal? And like, you use different facilities for different purposes. And so when I see connectivity, I think of local connectivity, but I also see jobs connectivity. I see transit connectivity. I see other stuff. And so right now, this
tells me all of the things. It makes me wonder if I was on that criteria and one day there's a lot more money and it's harder than which mile. This has all the things. And so if it's more a facility for recreation and health, that looks really different versus if it is for transportation. And I think right now, this leaves it really open and it's your first mile or two. So that's probably sufficient, but it does make me wonder when I see communities like Boulder and surrounding county, at some point they had a crisp vision that they wanted lots of their infrastructure to be for transportation purposes, and greenways are part of that. And so it just makes me wonder, like, what is the ultimate vision? Because it'll take 20 years to close networks. But if that's not part of the play, then that doesn't matter as much. So I think this is open and appropriate at the beginning, but I wish in Asheville, but that's like my priority, right? That like networked systems had been more intentional from the beginning and maybe we could have had closed those gaps sooner so that we got beautiful recreation and jobs and local shift potential. But yeah.
Right,
I'm in
to your
education.
question, like, I think it depends on where. So we could fund and build a greenway that follows the French Broad and St. Lake Garden. That would be a destination that people can Carson drive to and
Great.
play on.
And that would be great.
And that, if you're standing on it, the infrastructure is going to look the same as a greenway that say, I think DOT's been promising us for a decade to follow the I-240 widening. That's a mode shifting piece of infrastructure. It's probably going to get, it could, in theory, get funded the same way. It would look physically the same. It's an entirely different function. And if you're like making me pick which one I want, like spend public dollars on it. Mode shifting piece, but
My last 2 cents on this, I totally agree with what Parker said. If I had to choose, I would like to see the mode shifting ones too as the priority, but it's a mix, it's going to be mixed effect. I mean, most of the agreements we have in the community right now are kind of more recreational and they're hugely popular. I mean, the ones that have been built are just like hugely popular, right? So we can build more stuff like that too. The community will certainly love it. The my last 2 cents would be like, I would put more weight on like cost and feasibility. I've been on the county commission since 2012. We've been talking about building within greenways. The very first year I've been here, 10 years later, and we have not done, it's still in the planning process. So to me, it's like, which of these projects can get built in the next 1 to 3 years? Like, that's.
I would say 0.
Well, then 1 to 5 years, right? Because we talk about this stuff and nothing ever happens. And the best thing that we could do for the future of greenways and all this other infrastructure is to actually get projects done, because there's just sort of a belief that like it's too complicated for us to pull off, right? So just projects that can actually get done and which don't cost, even if they cost 3 million, great. If they don't cost 5 million, so I think in this part of the world where we have mountains and topography, like the costs. Projects are just going to get a wide variety of costs for a project, right? Some of them projects can still get done for $1 million a mile. Others will cost 5 or 6 or 7 million a mile. So I think we do have to be using taxpayer money, like figuring out where we can get projects done that are cost effective. Because at the end of the day, like this community's got so many different priorities. We can't be going out spending $20 million on like one project, right? Like that just doesn't work, right? So I think we should be looking for cost-effective projects that can actually get done.
So our last thing that we just wanted to touch on is kind of what the next steps are for this criteria and the agreement component of the bond. As I touched on earlier, we are going to ask for these to be approved today by the subcommittee, and if they are, we will be able to go to the Board of Commissioners for a briefing on June 6th. And then ideally for a request for adoption on June 20th. Once the criteria is adopted, we will be doing that Greenways public education campaign that I mentioned earlier. And as I said, the goal originally for that campaign was to really educate our community on what's involved in establishing a greenway so that we can set expectations around what's possible with these bond funds. But I also think there's opportunity to incorporate some of those educational pieces around the impact of greenways as well. And then there's a bit of a pause between now and when you would be launching the applications window for new projects. And that is because those shovel-ready projects that Thomas discussed are estimated to be completed in 2025. And to his point, we will not know what the full cost of those projects is until they are completed. And so we won't know how much money we have left over to allocate until they are completed. But that time also gives us the opportunity to work with potential applicants as well as community partners to understand what other projects are out there, what might be possibly funded, and to make sure their applications are ready for that application window. And we wanted to be able to get this evaluation criteria complete now, so they have an idea of what we're looking for.
Does that make sense, y'all? So, I mean, staff did struggle with whether we should move forward with doing this criteria now, because we are gonna wait until our other projects are done. Does that make sense? Just because we wanted to make sure we had the criteria available to the community, because these projects do take so long.
It's like, is there not, let me just ask this, like, do the staff not have some ideas about, like, we're talking about $5 million? Like, if we just say, what do y'all think we should do with it? Like, are there not some projects in mind where you think, like, you know, here would be a couple of great projects we could go get done? Do we, the process just almost feels like a little bit like overkill.
So I think,
Community, you know?
I think our goal is to make sure we're incorporating community input. And so that's why we were going through this process. But, obviously with the first two projects, the Inca and Woodbin, you all just said, this is what we want to do. And that is your prerogative. If you just want to pick a project and do it, that is always, your prerogative. But we wanted to make sure we got community input in case we wanted that to help you decide which project to do.
And
But it's up to you.
Well, and I think also to the point of thinking about the longer term future of greenways and economies, knowing now the kind of things we're looking for in greenways and that connectivity question especially will help us design what that looks like, be more intentional in the process. Now, to the point, like we do only have at max $5 million for this greenways component of the bond, but being intentional now and communicating to the public, I think will also help us moving forward.
There's only, sorry, commentary.
To your question, I'm just gonna throw this out there. So we're doing the Woodbin Greenway. And then there's what do you call it, the river Greenway. There's only basically there's a mile, right? There's a missing mile there. And if you talk about connectivity, you can make a really strong argument that ensuring that gets done, right? And then connected to very significant. I'll just put it out there.
You're talking about from the River Arts District back up to Broadway, that section that there's kind of nothing planned for, or nothing
It's,
scheduled.
from my
just
understanding,
happened.
right, I mean, Woodfin's gonna come in to right there.
It's like Silicon maybe.
Just, yeah.
Yeah.
Right
Oh,
there.
like, it's actually to the UNC Asheville property, it's right at the intersection.
Okay, and is it there then, and then, or maybe it's more than a mile, I was thinking they said it was just a mile to where then,
Just where it's up.
yeah, is that, it ends around there?
That's called 251? No, sorry. Yeah.
Riverside Drive too.
Riverside Drive, it's the city's greenway,
Okay, yeah.
and then, is it?
Yes, that is missing.
And there's about a mile, right?
Yeah.
Is what I was.
So I'm not gonna pretend that I have this web of greenways in Buncombe County, especially that missing
okay.
mile figured out.
Yeah.
However, I do know that there are a number of different projects already kind of in the works for that particular section.
Okay.
One of which, we kind of talked about this earlier, where there's kind of these projects that are not managed locally. They're managed by the NCDOT, and they're usually in concert with like a road widening project that may be going on. So when they're actually redoing that section of 251 Riverside Drive, there's actually already some money set aside for a connector along there. And then I'm told that there's also a connector that may actually happen along the river itself. So the NCDOT project would be a path that would be more closely associated with the road. What exactly that looks like is still being worked out.
DOT has a plan to widen the Riverside Drive.
It's,
Part of the.
I say widen, it's like redesign / reorganize the right of way.
It's more good stuff.
I think it's part of, it's like 26, I-26.
Not what you're thinking.
I think it's,
Or actually 6th,
I think it's an I-26 segment.
is the new bridge.
Right, exactly. So I can, and I know there's a lot of conversation, hopefully you have conversations there, but it gets very acronym-y and I need maps to piece it all together.
I agree.
So basically, there's just work being done there that may address
Correct.
that.
It might be up to 15 years before we have it in construction, but it's in the DOT patch. There you go.
So I get, my only concern is, we went through this whole greenway planning process a decade ago.
Yeah.
Before any of us were here, right? We have very little to show for it. So just the idea of like, let's go do a greenway planning process. It's like, if there are projects, we could actually just take these funds that voters have approved and go build some good projects. I honestly think that's what the community wants us to do. So if there are such projects, I would love to kind of look at that list of like, are there some things we already know, based on past public input? Then I'd love to look at that. If there's truly not, like if there's really just not beyond the 3 projects that you listed that, like our 5 million can help get across the finish line. If there's truly not, then yeah, I guess you could go do some kind of process, but.
There's this feasibility studies and cost estimates that are years old, but on some segments of Greenway, that creek, that's blocked out. So that exists.
So I guess we can come back and share that list at the next meeting and talk a little bit more. And it sounds like I heard some changes to potential weighted criteria as well.
Yes.
Is everybody okay with talking about this again? Not necessarily voting
And
on
can you
all
send
of it.
this criteria to us?
Sure.
Yes, if you haven't already, I didn't, if you sent it, I missed it.
But we'll resend. Okay.
I mean, just one other like question I'll throw out. I mean, this is not very deep processy, and I don't know how it would score in this kind of scoring criteria process, but we do have we are going through a public planning process, right? Like on the Ferry Road county and property, right? Which is a whole bunch of property on the French River front that the county already owns. And that there's, we want to, it's beautiful. Like we want to create trails and public access for people to go out there. It would be a purely recreational project. There's no transportation functionality to it at all, but is there currently any funding to implement a project out there once we've kind of gone through our planning process? Because it does seem like one where we already own this land, there's no easements needed, it's amazing. So I just wonder if some funding or, I don't know, just, I guess I always thought maybe some funding would go there. So I guess just the question is how does that fit in? How does our planning process around Cary Road, which is it's probably gonna have greenways, how does that fit into this process? And then also the Tomney Mountain Park idea that's come forward, right? There's this public acquisition of this, the Spider, I'm sorry. And there's public access and trail stuff identified
And that
primarily
probably was
around
more
that.
passive.
Too, would that not fit in this bucket?
Like dirt trail.
Well, if you're talking about hiking trails, that's more with the passive, but if you're talking about connecting that to something else, then that would be greenways.
Well, I guess I've heard some ideas around ADA accessibility and, some stuff, is there not a greenway? But that was just a question I would ask too.
I mean, I think it comes down to if you want to prioritize projects that we have potentially in the hopper, like what you're talking about, or if you want to open it up to other entities who may have projects. So that was the RFP process would allow you to do that.
I do wonder, who are the other entities that would do this?
Other municipalities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't see community groups who are positioned except for,
I don't see any.
Yeah, it'd be municipalities
Yeah.
primarily.
Passive
The
recognition could be like other, like nonprofits and then.
Yeah, I can see like this, because Sorba had like having capacity to take money and construct something that, for something of this level of infrastructure. Okay, that makes sense.
I mean, this process will allow us to weigh projects that we have in the hopper with something that Woodfin might suggest. And then we can compare them at the time that we get the projects back in together and say, well, this one does meet more of the criteria and we can do it faster and we can, do all those things. So that's what this would allow us to do. No.
Hey, just one clarification. So there's the three projects that could be, those projects can be implemented in the next 5 years, right? They're not ones that we're paying for, because they're already in
Yeah,
advanced
and-
stages. So it'd be like new projects would take longer.
Correct. So those projects are in kind of varying stages. Kind of when I started here, I kind of took over the project management of those particular projects.
Yeah.
The Woodfin project in particular, we were actually asked to separate into two separate projects. So that has kind of caused some delays even since I've been here. The separation of those projects has been approved by NCDOT. So right now, Highway 251 section, and that's kind of the section of the Woodfin Greenway that goes along Highway 251 and the French Broad River. That's in the later stages of preliminary engineering. We actually hope to go to right-of-way acquisition for that in the fall or early winter of this year. The Beaver Dam Creek section is in the early stages of preliminary engineering. So we're really kicking off that process. That's a smaller greenway, so we think we'll move through that a little bit faster than what we've been able to do with Highway 251. And then the Inca Heritage Trail, we're in the mid to late stages of preliminary engineering with that particular trail. But yes, the answer is yes, we believe that we can get those.
That makes sense. What's part of 25? Current phase, so right away.
So per discussion, I'll reshare out the criteria presentation and we will plan to come back to the next meeting to discuss that list of the as well as refine the criteria weighting based on.
Thank you. Doing that. Got 55 minutes and 60 minutes of talking to do. Dave,
Yes, sir. That was a nice presentation. The best part was the forethought on litter and waste management. So, and we appreciate that on any project. We love projects, but let's put the forethought into how are we going to manage the waste and recycling folks. So that's for, let us know how we can support that. And then I may need some support on sharing my screen.
Okay.
All right, Jennifer, I thought I did.
Oh, okay, what do you need to do?
Go to stop for a second.
Okay.
All right, sorry about that delay. So wanted to provide some context to the group today about our franchise waste recycle solutions for Buncombe County. So talking about our contract, that is currently with Buncombe County and Waste Pro. So Waste Pro is our current provider. The franchise waste collections contract started January 1st of 2020. The base term of the contract is 5 years. And built into that contract that we have approved and executed are two-year extension options. Like I said, that's weekly trash and every other week recycling. This is a subscription-based program. Like we've talked about numbers, around 34,000 households signed up for that service now, where there's around 55,000 or so single-family households. So contract decisions coming up soon, some important dates or important timelines that we're looking at. So the base term is set to expire at the end of next year, calendar year 2024. So as I mentioned, there were extension options built into the contract that was executed. The first one would extend it 2 years, and then there's an additional 2 years. talking through with legal and getting some advice, there is the possibility of considering going ahead and doing both extensions at one time. I'm not saying we advocate for that. I'm just saying that is what I understand is an option to say, let's do both. And that effectively extends it 4 years past the base term. So just want to make sure that was, you're aware. And as always an option to seek competitive bids for these services. That is a huge undertaking. I think a lot of us remember what it was like. Waste Pro was already the provider, but moving to the cart-based collection, that was a major process. And those carts, those assets, they are Waste Pros. So around 64,000 carts in the field, those are Waste Pros assets. So you've seen in other markets where a new contractor comes in and they do some type of agreement with the current provider. So we'll buy those carts from you and slap some stickers on, something to that effect. But that's a substantial hurdle. So thinking about that process, that's trucks, that's people, that's facility, figuring out how a new contractor positions themselves. At the earliest, we want to look to go out to bid would be beginning of next year. And I would like to push even earlier than that if that's the direction we're going. And also talking about the extensions, we would need to notify Waste Pro that Buncombe County is going to go ahead and move forward with the extensions. We want to do that by August to comply with the terms of the contract. And that's really just saying, hey, Waste Pro, we're going to do the extension past the base term. And appreciate Max and Kate's efforts to help us with the recent survey we did. Max, if you don't care to run through the process there.
So we've done a lot of surveys with Waste Pro in the past, but we figured because this decision is coming up so soon for you all, we wanted to give you kind of the public's view of not only their current satisfaction with Waste Pro, but kind of what they feel as far as contract extension, or if a renegotiation were to take place, is what services would you like to add to it? And we got 1,300 replies because people love talking about it. We divided it up between 3 different surveys: current Waste Pro customers, former Waste Pro customers, and customers who have always been eligible for Waste Pro who just never subscribed to it, because we wanted to delineate between the 3 and not have them all take the same survey, because it could lead to bias in the results. Because if you were a former Waste Pro customer, you probably weren't thrilled with, So either way. So the current customer results, we had, next slide, we had 1,229. And basically we asked, are you currently satisfied with Waste Pro? 605 said they were satisfied, 600 said they weren't, and 24 just didn't respond. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, then we specifically asked, should Buncombe County look for a new curbside provider, go through an RFP? Should we extend or renegotiate? And 585 said we should look for a new provider, go for an RFP. And 502 said extend the current contract. 142 did not respond. However, the important part of that question is when we asked people, did you want to extend or renegotiate the current contract? We asked what different services or what kind of changes would you like to make to the contract? And that's on the next slide. Most people wanted weekly recycling pickup because it's every other week now. A lot of people wanted composting and yard waste pickup. And there were a lot of, basically, if you were to word cloud the 1,000 comments associated with this, one that's not mentioned here is obviously cost. Cost would be the big one, because the cost of Waste Pro is a big complaint to a lot of people. But basically, these are what services they would like renegotiated. We'll send you this information so you can take a look at it again at your own time. And then,
Sorry,
yes, go ahead.
Pause on bear protection for a second. I don't know why this is just on and on me, but it doesn't seem like we have a community-wide kind of strategy on protecting trash from the bears and the bears from the trash.
Funny you should say that,
Right.
because actually Ashley Hobbs at North Carolina Wildlife, I met with them yesterday, and so that is, I will send you some information, and this is definitely a larger conversation, but I do not want to hijack Dane's right now.
Sure.
That could take quite a while if we go down that bear route, so I'll.
Maybe we should
table at it,
maybe we should talk about it here.
but we could maybe.
Well, the bear thing is in 2 different categories. One is that you leave the cart out and like the bear cart just won't protect the trash. The bears are getting it because they're bears. And the second one is that they think they're going to come earlier in the day, so they take the carts out when they think they're going to come out, so it's not waiting out there for bears, and then they don't come when they're supposed to come, and then the bears are bears, and they get into a fair. So those are the two problems they have with the bear carts through the comments.
Yeah, being bear wise, that's something I feel like we can do some more collaboration on. I know Waste Pro offers bear resistant, nothing bear proof, bear resistant cars. So
Yeah.
they're expensive. I mean, they're around $350 if a subscriber wanted to buy that. But we negotiated at the start of the contract, like what's a little bit smaller to buy, so you can lease those for like $9.50 a month. But it is an expensive thing to do, but they're effective. They're just, like I said, nothing's bear proof. We do have we have a lot of carts out. I'll get an updated number. I mean, it's.
Can we put that on a future agenda maybe? Sarah, is that?
And I'll share some information that I
Okay.
spoke with Ashley about, and I had Sergeant Robinson with Animal Control. He attended the meeting with me.
Okay.
Okay.
Get the people who put the bear billboard out on 26 to come and talk to. Protect the bears.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen them.
Okay, sorry, Dan.
Oh, no.
Good
topic.
The other survey results, we put in the appendix, that's for the former Waste Pro customers and the people who never applied, never got it and why they didn't. And we can send you that PowerPoint if you want to see it. The people who were former customers aren't thrilled, and 15% said they would be willing to go back though to Waste Pro.
Of the ones who were former customers.
Yes.
Okay.
15%.
Okay.
Was there clearly a specific reason they were sharing?
Go to the appendix, isn't there? I don't want to guess.
I think in the
I'll
notes,
look at it.
some missed service performance.
It's mostly
issues.
Okay.
And we did see scattered all through their customer service, hard to get a hold of, things that we have heard over the years. I know we all have. So we did see that reflected in the comments. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
So contractor performance, talking about, consolidating some of the feedback we've gotten as far as formal complaints, service issues in the field since the start of January of 2020. So we, Buncombe County Solid Waste Department, have received 587 complaints, like I said, since the start of the contract. When you think about how many services have been performed in that time frame, it's a large number. Obviously, that's a weekly thing. About 7.87 million services, that's either trash or recycle, they've done since the start of the contract. We have issued $42,700 in liquidated damages. Those are all pretty much associated with missed service. And if we've received a report and we were seeing those patterns where there was a lot of misses starting to come in, that's when we say, look, we're going to find you for these amount of misses documented. Here's the area. You did not respond within 24 hours, and the contract allows us to do liquidated damages. And the fine, again, fines primarily associated with miscollection.
That complaint rate strikes me as like low. How do you interpret that number relative to complaints?
Yeah, so you can't chalk this all complaints that we receive as how many actual misses they have. They may miss something and nobody reached out to us. So yes, you can't get to a percentage level when you factor in how many service events compared to the complaints we received off of that.
I feel like I've received that many emails about that I couldn't.
Yeah.
And it's ebbs and flows, really, because you can look back and see, we'll have some that you can get 50, 60 a month. And then like the past few months, several, we've not heard anything. So it is very cyclical.
It has improved, I will say, over this 3 years.
I feel that way.
Yeah, and there's definitely a reduction in the emails I'm getting compared to when I first started.
Okay.
This reflects that too.
Their will has been shattered.
So talking timeline, next steps, June 6th, briefing presentation with the Board of Commissioners. So we'll talk, similar to this conversation we're having today, we'll talk about the recent survey and discussion of contract extension or going out to bid. And then June 20th, that'll be at the Board of Commissioners formal meeting. In August, that's our time frame when we want to have a decision for sure to notify Westbrook we are going to extend.
So can you talk more about process if we want, because you said that going out to bid, pretty intensive. Can you kind of just lay out more that, the extension, what that looks like versus going out to bid?
Yeah. Well, it does, because if we're extending the time, they're through their base term, right? So I think it gives us time to have the conversation on, do we want to negotiate? Weekly recycling is going to be more expensive. I can just say that right now. It's more service events. There's things to consider too, but people are setting their waste and recycle carts out 1 week. They're not having to set all those carts out the following. So that there's things to think through on that. There's, what was the second bullet point? There's the recycle piece. The bear.
Compost was the second one, then bears.
Yeah, there's some items. Waste Pro has verbally told me they're willing to have these conversations as far as if there's some negotiation pieces we want to talk through and look at coming to some type of terms with those. That buys a little bit more time. Now, if it's a bid thing, we got to get cranking and make sure that RFP work is where it needs to be. Because we want to include that information in the RFP as well. If we're making those programmatic changes as far as application service, we want to include that in RFP or talking through a negotiation with Waste Pro as well.
I'll chime on the nuance there. What's the difference between stuff we ask them to do and stuff we have to?
Well, because we're in a contract with them now, like for the weekly trash every other week recycling.
Yeah.
So, if we work on that piece, Waste Pro says, okay, we can shift to weekly recycling. Here's what that number would look like. We would really have to go to the board to get approval to make that type of modification. Like I said, it's trying to lump that together into, okay, it's an extension, but here's the changes we're looking to make with the extended services.
The cost, the increased costs, we'll have to weigh, that will be the cost and how much people are gonna think about that.
Right.
Do you have any kind of sense what that would cost the consumer to go to the weekly recycling, just a rough?
I could see $3 to $4 more easy for that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's just my high level.
Sure.
Thinking about that.
Going to recycling every week instead of every other week.
What's the current rate?
$22.55 monthly. That was from last year's inflationary increase and recycling increase.
So, Dane, is there a current recommendation from the staff around extend versus go out to RFP?
Yeah, extension.
Extension.
Yes.
Due to your extension or 2 to 4?
Yes, I mean, if we could get the 4-year, if there was, a palette for that, I would look for that. I understand if we want to recommend a 2-year, and then it's just you're doing the same process again in about 18 months.
That's not a lot of time.
And if we do the 2 or 4-year extension, and of course, the working assumption that Waste Pro would agree to that too, right? Because they don't have to, or do they have to agree?
It's
Or
the county's
their
option. Yeah, I feel like that's a county option.
We have an option to extend it, so they don't have a chance to say, no, thanks, it's been great.
That is my understanding.
Okay. And so your sense is that while it sounds good to be out, hey, let's go out there, let's see what anybody out there could offer us. Let's get all the different ideas and all the different bids. If we do that, then Waste Pro can rebid too. And so your crystal ball is telling you, for all of the things that people haven't been totally happy with about this, that this is the best deal we're gonna get over the next 2 to 4 years. So better to keep it locked in, maybe look at tweaking it some rather than reopening it up.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And it's interesting too, when you look at the bid we did last time, Waste Pro was the only responsive bidder. We did have somebody else turn in a bid that was only half of the criteria on the RFP. That was Santec, which is now Republic. They bought them out, but Waste Pro is just now getting close to where their base bid, if we just went carts only, that was the only thing they bid. They were not picking up bags off the ground, but they were around $24.50, $25 then in 2019 was the only other information we got from a bidder. Now, like I said, it's subjective on my end. We put it out there and there could be a competitive interest. Putting in carts made us a lot more attractive market. And I think that helped position us to hopefully be more competitive when the time comes that it does make the most sense to bid those services out.
And have we looked at what other, like our, whatever, our most similar comparable jurisdictions, where they're at with their rates to see if like the Waste Pro contract still looks good compared to what else is happening out there, similar circumstances?
I think we could do a little more work on that, Commissioner. We can do some more, because I can think of some right off the top of my head, like in the Charlotte area, which is interesting, little simpler layout to get to people. They're very similar to their subscription rate, because I know their director down there, so we'll dive into that a little bit deeper.
Bring that to the briefing. We have you out the briefing 6.
Okay, so are you wanting us to take any vote, and make any recommendation at this level, or this is just more information and then briefing what we do?
If you all want to vote, you can, as a subcommittee, to recommend it to the full board or not. We don't have a specific request.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah. Look at this environment.
I mean, based on the information that, we have now, I mean, I would say, that focusing on extending the current contract and maybe looking for ways to tweak it or improve it, things like that, as the primary focus does seem like the most, yeah, I mean, it's just like the world, it's just like this kind of the idea of like opening it up. Like it doesn't intuitively feel like this is going to be the moment where we get an awesome deal for the next 10 years. It just has nothing feels that way right now. Like this is the time to buy, like.
I agree with that, and I do feel like if there are those couple tweaks that just demonstrate that we've taken this opportunity to celebrate improvement, I just think that buys goodwill.
Absolutely. Because we have received a lot of that feedback. I receive recycle not weekly.
Yeah.
Because I know I have friends and family like, is it red week or blue week? I'm just going to send it out every week and they'll pick, and if there is a service disruption and you didn't get, and then we got big problems.
Yes.
Another thing too, Waste Pro, we're talking through, we'll provide more information, is trying to transition to maybe a 4-day work week. We have seen historically, it seems like the snow's always hit on Friday in Weaverville. Our Friday collection folks are Saturday, or if you can get, so for holidays, disruption gives you one more day of the week. And that's what the city of Asheville operates too. It's a 4-day collection week. So those are things we're talking through too, hopefully that would make service better. But again, those are Waste Pros willing to come to the table and talk to us. So I think that's encouraging.
I'm willing to make a motion to take the staff recommendation to extend the contract through 2024. Is that what? I want to make sure, what are you asking for?
So we think about the base term is in end of year 2024. The first 2 year would extend us through the end of 2026. I'm Swain County, help me do my math there, 2026. If we did the second 2 years, that would be through the end of 2028.
Why don't we just, for now, just say extend it and like, kind of like think a little bit more about the tier or
Leave it more, but
Okay. So I'll make a motion that we extend the Waste Pro contract and look at how we can potentially make some adjustments based on the feedback we've received from the community.
So there's a motion, is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Carrie, this is Meg. I'm so sorry. I couldn't hear what you said. Would you mind to repeat it?
Yes, I made a motion that we extend, based on the staff recommendation, that we extend the Waste Pro contract and then look at how we can potentially tweak that based on community feedback.
Got it. Okay. I will second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
thank you.
Good. Good job. Thanks, Dean. Bears. There's a battery storage study.
Yeah, you want to talk batteries for a few minutes?
Why?
Yeah, can you stop sharing?
Oh, dang.
Wake up, sorry.
You open that door.
I love it. At least it's not Graham County.
Everything
Oh.
was right, yeah.
All right, so energy storage and electrification study for county facilities. This is exactly what it sounds like. And it's based on, actually a lot of feedback from this group. Terry, you mentioned on a number of occasions your interest in energy storage. Parker, you've brought this group some potential like draft language on building electrification. Right? So yeah, this really was many months of sort of trying to read the tea leaves with this group and saying like, there's a clear interest in these two topics. So let's look at what we can do, right? Let's take a look at our facilities. To begin to understand next steps as, you know, as PV options become more limited and I think we're going out of rooftops, right? What is that next set of projects, right? To examine both the energy and the economic impacts of doing energy storage as well as potential building electrification. Did Mike leave? Oh, okay. I was like, dude, you're like the one guy I need in the room. Okay. Sorry. Just his chair's empty as soon as I start. Sorry. And, you know, the potential here is to utilize this analysis, number one, to develop a new pipeline of potential projects. And potentially, again, to your earlier point, is potentially develop or just enhance policies that might influence our potential growth and impact as we continue to build. So this will be kind of split into two topics, right? We're going to talk battery storage first, then we're going to talk electrification second. While the study itself was interrelated, I'd like to examine them as a group, sort of individual. Battery storage will take hopefully less time because frankly, I was very happy, pleasantly surprised at the economics of battery storage. And I think you will be too. And even during the course of doing this analysis, the costs of battery storage have continued to come down. And so some of these projects are pretty amazing. But for the benefit of those who are either in the room or could potentially be watching online now, I wanted to make sure we set a table just to understand what is battery storage, right? It's really big batteries. It's like what's in your phone, only it can be the size of a walk-in closet, right? So there's a ton of potential benefits to adding energy storage. Demand charge savings are a pretty obvious one. Peak reduction and peak shifting, which can lead to then energy arbitrage. And what that really means is like you're reducing your peak at one time of day and you're paying for electricity when it's cheaper at other times of day. And then of course, solar export reduction, which wouldn't qualify for all of our facilities, but where we have done PV, a library would be a great example. I think if you want to think of Western Library, I think you do. And you know, that's a system where like in the middle of the day, that system is likely overproducing, right? On a big sunny day in May, it's creating a lot more energy than is necessary and sending that energy to the grid, which means we're giving Duke that energy and getting very little in return for it, right? Duke gets most of that benefit. And there is something to be said for just putting clean energy on it. That's a good thing. But it would allow us to keep that in-house and use it when we need it to reduce the consumption, reduce charges and various things like that. So that's kind of what solar export reduction potentially is. Building electrification, building beneficial electrification, building decarbonization, a lot of those terms are kind of used interchangeably with people.
You know, we gotta pick one.
Yeah, we gotta pick one. That's fair.
The industry, I would say.
Yeah, and essentially that's exactly, it is what it sounds like, right? It's a shift to using electricity rather than burning fossil fuels for meeting your energy needs. And again, there's more to that, but we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get to it. So just a little bit of the methodology so you understand what we did. Obviously, we go out to all these sites, we confirm the current equipment sizing, the layout, potential space limitations, et cetera. Analyzing utilities, natural gas, electricity, determining the increased load requirements needed if we were to fuel switch, right? Stop using gas and you're going to be using more electricity. What would those load requirements be? energy system right sizing and the impacts of that. Right sizing the batteries is a challenge, can be a challenge, based on the energy needs of that facility. And then identifying those fuel switching opportunities and storage opportunities. And then what are the financial and energy impacts of that, right? So what's the new equipment? What's that new equipment cost? What are the scenarios for just energy storage or energy storage and MEP, which is mechanical electrical and plumbing? MEP, when I say MEP, we're talking electrification. That's what that means. Switching out all the old stuff, bringing in all the new stuff. And then things like rate of return, net present value, simple payback. We want to know what the impacts of like making that transition would be, both with and without incentives that I keep hearing about, but I haven't seen, and we are still waiting on guidance for. Most of the financial benefits of the IRA seem really attractive, could potentially make these even more financially attractive. But we kind of ran the scenario for both, because again, we're not exactly sure what's going to qualify and what's not. And I can't find one, for example, a battery made in America, good luck, right? Like, so there are challenges there.
Are the related to like hot water heating or HVAC for commercial buildings, whether they're private or government owned? There's not point of sale rebates or tax refunds for our infrastructure. Is it? That was all residential.
No, there would be, so energy storage would get a 30% tax credit.
Yes.
Same.
But HVAC or hot water heating though.
Hot water, I don't know about hot water.
Okay.
I do know that some potential HVAC upgrades could. But again, we don't have a ton of direct guidance on that yet. But mostly when we talk about the incentives, we're talking about storage.
Right.
Super high level takeaways. There are a lot of really outstanding opportunities for energy storage, primarily where we've already installed PV and there's a reasonable amount of consumption. And we're on a time of use rate structure for the utility. Again, these are not really surprising things, but high level takeaways here. Electrification, not so much. Time is coming, but it's probably not today. But again, I want to talk about enhancing policies to help drive us in the right direction. So this is just an example, and I hate that I'm trying to prevent this from getting like too nerdy. And so I'm only showing you one. They could show you a dozen, but this is an example of the Health and Human Services building, right? And so just to give you an example of like how this energy storage study works, what we're looking at here, and I need to move this out of the way so I can actually see that. It's pretty cool. So this is one of the things we do in sort of when I was talking about right sizing the battery system, kind of toggle back and forth between different battery sizes to understand how to maximize the utilization of that battery. So that chart you see on the left there is number of days per year that the battery is being maximized between 80 and 100%, right? And in this particular case, you're getting 300 days of the year where we're maximizing the use of that battery. That basically means Monday through Friday, right? There's weekends where the building's empty and so there's not a lot going on there. The chart on the right, the dark blue is the current demand. Light blue is what battery storage does to that demand. And you can see there's a precipitous drop, right? The green is the solar and the yellow is the battery storage, right? Again, without getting too nerdy, too into the weeds on it, the point here is you see max peak demand drop, but you see the overall demand significantly come down during those hours between, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m.
This is
Right.
theoretically, if you were to apply a battery to a facility with solar.
This is our facility, Health and Human Services.
But it's a projection.
It is a projection.
Okay.
Well, yeah, there's no
It's not
battery,
locked
so,
in.
yeah,
Is there solar here?
there is solar.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Just want to make sure it's good.
So that proposed system, if we were to do, it's a 100 kWh system. It's about $75,000. You get about $28,000 in first year savings and a payback of less than 3 years.
That's amazing.
It's insane. Yeah.
And what's
Blowing my
what's
mind.
interesting about
I'm-
that,
I'm-
because it's
I'm-
on time of use. So
Correct.
the savings are driven by the fact that the expensive electricity you would have bought in midday,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
don't
it is.
have to buy as much during those hours.
That is exactly
Push
right.
it out with the most time of use rates. Because it's commercial, there's time of use
Yes,
rates.
But it's not just about time of use, it's fundamentally you're buying less because
it's both.
it's both. So it's time of use, but it's
Yes.
also,
Yes,
you're using your solar throughout the whole day instead of just the peak
Yeah.
times.
yes and yes, right? So it is both. If you were to
That's
do this
insane.
exact same
Why
facility,
isn't everybody?
but this facility, well, not everybody already has PV installed, right? So that, the PV and the energy storage combined are what makes this so attractive, right? The energy storage here would be attractive on not a time of use rate, but not nearly like this, right? Because again, what you're doing is you're shifting when you're buying electricity to, you know, a time of day when it's 6 cents a kilowatt hour and not 13 or 14 cents a kilowatt hour, which is what it is most of the time. Time of use actually is not as terrible most of the time.
Right.
But with energy storage, it's perfect.
So the cost estimate is all in, install, you know.
Yeah, the 75.
The wall, like all of
Yeah.
the plumb, like all of that's all in.
And not 30% ITC or it?
Not.
Gosh.
Can you help, I know, can you say a little more to interpret this? So like in this specific scenario, when, when you use the batteries, when are you shifting, you're absorbing some of the power to be used elsewhere? Like, when are you shifting it to? Are you shifting it to? I'm just trying to get I guess the yellow part. The yellow part's the battery, what you're doing with the battery. You're drawing some down and then releasing it.
That's exactly what I
Which is only useful for a couple hours.
So it looks like you're releasing it back in midday, is that right? Or when are you just talk us through that?
Yeah,
Are these
why-
pricing exactly the same?
yes, the point here, the difference is it's showing you sort of that max. So this is the. total tool base, I'm sure you're not looking at this. It's just used all the time. The point of this particular graph is to show you the max that you use, right? So if you see it in one and see it in the other.
Jeremiah, correct me if I'm wrong, but this
Yeah,
is, you can't really see where the top of the mountain is shaped off because there's that gray thing over it, but that's what you're supposed to take
Well,
away.
the peak drops, yeah, the peak drops, but if you look,
Okay,
yeah,
so
again, I'm sorry that I do this to people because this is super nerdy and not hard, but like, the dark blue is just business as usual today.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
The light blue is if we add energy storage, that's how much of the demand we're shaving off. So all of that dark blue that you see goes away, right? So it's not the best graph.
It's just hard to see because that gray box is.
Yeah,
It's the same, the dark blue is the same on both of those boxes.
correct.
And the blue is the same. The chart is exactly the same. You're just showing two separate,
Peaks.
right?
What's different is it's showing you the difference in the peaks.
Yeah.
Right?
But like, how much of that dark blue, how much of that would be shaved just because of the solar versus?
That's what the green is. So the green is just the solar. So if you can imagine the solar without the light blue, right? If you take the light blue out of the picture, the solar kind of eats the middle there, right? Again, middle of the day, solar's at its peak. If you then imagine the dark blue completely going away, the solar is covering between the solar and the battery storage demand, you're using nothing. That, does that make sense? I know it's really hard to.
I think what's happening is coincidentally, the peak of the solar midday is overlapping with the peak of the demand of the building.
Right.
So those curves are kind of overlapping a little bit,
They
and you're,
come out together.
the storage is knocking off the top, off the peak and expanding the shoulders.
Correct.
Of the peak.
Correct. I mean, in a perfect scenario, what you see is a flat line,
Yeah,
right? We've got some that actually kind of have a flat line almost.
yeah.
Uh,
We see it, you have more of these, maybe.
Yeah,
I got a million of these. I got a million of these.
Okay.
Does this only work in certain threshold facilities?
Every facility is a little different, right? Because the tariff might be a little different, the size of the consumption might be a little different. The size of the PV system is probably different, right? In this particular instance, the Health and Human Services building and the parking garage are on the same meter, so it's one giant facility. There's a canopy system going in, right? That is for the whole facility, so it's pretty sizable.
Yeah.
You know, PV system. Not every rooftop can fit in like that, right? So this one Obviously, I used my best.
This is your best one.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you my best up front. But one of the things we did with this, I wanna, I stop sharing for a second. So I wanna take you guys to a dashboard that we're building. Because this is so much data, it's a lot, right? It's hard for anybody to, it's all based on this gigantic matrix. It's just basically a spreadsheet. It'll make your eyes go across. I do want to show you guys, we're working on a dashboard that hopefully makes this a little easier for everybody to see and kind of understand. So this is us building out a dashboard here. Gives us all of this financial information. So if we want to look at, Dane's here, so I'm gonna pull up instead of health and services, I'll pull up the transfer station. I do want to caveat, we're still working on this dashboard, so it's not fully complete. So there's a bit of data missing here and there. So this dashboard, if I pull up the transfer station, will tell me, okay, they got one building here, it's got a PV system, the size of the PV system, the energy offset of that PV system. If we were to go with storage, which is what I have this set to right now, it would be a net cost of about $40,000 with no incentives. Would have a payback of around 3 years. And then this was what it would look like if that 30%, again, caveat, I don't know for sure that that's something we'll be able to take advantage of, but I hope so.
I mean, the 30% battery storage ITC is real and live, and
Right.
it's not, I don't think we have guidance we're waiting on for that piece of the law.
Well, we don't pay taxes, so ITC doesn't apply to us. This would be a direct pay.
Oh, you're waiting on the guidance on direct pay?
Yes, yeah, because that's the only way we can take advantage.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you know, this just gives you a snapshot of like what an individual project will look like, or multiple projects. And then you can set it to say, I want to do incentives, I want to say we give incentives and yeah, simple payback with incentives. So a simple payback would be 2.5 years on this project.
Sorry, do you charge like churches and nonprofits, commercial time of use rates like they do us?
I mean, it depends on the building. Yes, the answer is yes, yeah. Yeah. I'd tell you one thing, and I don't want to get off topic, but one of the things that this whole thing is sort of brought up for us is totally reevaluating our tariffs and rate structures, like based on the fact that we have PBL on sites now, and that we probably should be shifting to, like, again, time of use is probably not the best in most cases. But for us now, the solar, potentially the storage, time of use is home run, right? Again, it's a no-brainer.
Also makes me think like, you all have done so much with solar that I'm jealous that like solar and battery is just a slam dunk because we think like you have the tools now to run the analysis that thinking of them as combined projects when the money works out is just such a good direction.
It's, again, it exceeded my expectations. And again, part of that is that, you know, we're on the right tariff in a lot of cases. We've got PV in a lot of cases, and batteries just keep getting cheaper. You know, when we first started the process, we were getting quotes at around $900 kWh installed. You know, again, as you said, it's a turnkey. That's already down to $750, and that's just during the process of the study, right, from the same vendor. So we're seeing rates come down to a point where, again, it's a no-brainer to do some of these projects.
And about how long do the batteries last?
So the industry standard is about a 10-year warranty, right? And so we think about that a lot when it comes to anything we buy. It's like,
Right.
if the payback on it is way past the end life of the thing, well,
Yeah.
that's a pretty tough sell. But when you can get something that, again, if you get incentives, it pays for itself in 2 years, 2.5 years, and you've still got 8 years of warranty left on the thing before, you know, that's just swap it out.
Back to the health and human service, just because that was about, let's say even without the
Yeah.
incentives, it's about a 3-year payback, so
Yeah.
you've got at least 7 years, probably longer.
Yeah.
But, and then how much at that point, was it about 30,000 a year, it was gonna save us on that one building?
That would just be in the first year,
Okay,
but with utility escalators, that's only gonna go up. And that each of these buildings has a full, like, 20-page analysis.
Yeah.
That if you really want to read that, go for it. I wanted to keep it simple for everybody. That discusses like what we sort of estimate is like an annual escalator for utility costs, and as well as getting into the details of the equipment.
What's a round number that you estimate for that?
Well, we typically use like 3 or 4%, when we say like, that's what we expect utility rates to go up each year. That said, I mean, we're seeing well over that. That's a pretty conservative estimate. But we try to be conservative with those. It's the under promise over the limit, right? So anyway, I wanted to show you this dashboard because I'm proud of it. I think it's cool.
You should be.
But it is still kind of in the works, and we've got some tweaks to make to it. But we do want to make this available for any of you guys to toggle through and play with, and if you have questions about it or anything. So I'm gonna go back to my PowerPoint now.
Jeremiah, what are the batteries made of? What type of battery?
They're almost everything's a little. Yeah,
Is it lithium iron phosphate that they quoted, or is it?
that's a good question. I don't know.
Is it McKinney Creed quoted the?
It wasn't McKim Creed. I mean, that's the contract we're using to do a lot of analysis. It was TROES, they're a Canadian battery manufacturer. We did get multiple quotes from them, but they were by far the cheapest, and they're a good company. TROES, TROES.
Okay.
I can send you all the details.
Okay.
Yeah, trying to keep it not super confusing. Oh, no. I want to give you guys an example of my top 5. And again, just to show you like how cost effective this could potentially be. So these buildings were the 5 that sort of stood out to me. There are some that were probably a little better in terms of like payback, but I was thinking bang for the buck, high usage facilities that are really big, lots of square footage, et cetera. These 5 facilities would cost $350,000, save us almost 90 grand a year, and would pay for themselves in 4 years. Just those 5 projects alone, And again, it's all because we've already made this massive investment in PV, right?
So if these buildings didn't have PV on them, the case for this would be.
Invest, right? You would probably see something in the 13 to 15 range. Depending on the person. The PV makes a giant. It makes a giant.
I think getting a little bit more detail on this would actually be like.
Yeah.
Would be great, because I think, it sounds great, I'm like, let's do this, but I would like to more fully understand exactly how, because I'm still not totally clear how we're achieving the savings.
Sure.
Right, so just anyway, we don't have to do that today, but I would be interested in kind of,
Yeah,
I would dig into
absolutely.
like how.
I'm happy to send it to you guys. Again, we've got a little bit of work left to do, but when I have a complete package, I'm happy to send it out.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds really interesting.
And again, this slide is not 30% IPC.
I'm not using that yet, honestly. I think it could be even better. And if you want to get into the weeds, like really into the weeds, I can certainly line up a conversation with our engineer, who is just a super interesting guy. You guys would love. He always shows up in like a purple velvet suit. He's a very interesting guy, but he's way smarter than me and could, again, probably explain this stuff in a way that might make a little more sense. I still feel like I'm in the learning curve right now with a lot of this. So it's been really exciting. I'm really stoked about it.
My question is just when I look at these buildings.
Yeah.
Out here, is there any security or resilience benefit in storage there in terms of, like, for the animal shelter with the public safety training center,
So-
maybe, like, just being, and I don't know if we looked at it through that lens, if there would be any reason to like, just do it differently, like oversize the batteries or something. If
Love that question.
we were trying to achieve that goal as well.
Yeah, so number one, you made me lose a bet with myself because I had her asking. So I was certain that Maggie was going to ask the resilience question. So the short answer is, yes, it does provide a modicum of resilience at this level. But it's not enough that that would be the selling.
It's
point
so
of the project.
fragile,
Right,
right? So it wouldn't sustain itself.
Exactly.
That's where we want to go, right? It's like the
Exactly.
libraries are the safe place when everyone else's lights go out, but this storage, like our whole utility system isn't really ready for us to do that.
yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. You could, in theory, take one of these sites and very much like oversize the battery. Because these are optimized. These batteries are optimized to maximize payback and reduce demand charges, all of those types of things. It's really about the financial stuff, right? The resilience piece. So for example, we did like a quick analysis at the public safety training center. How could you run this building on this battery and for how long? 2 hours, you know? It's not enough of a piece that it was worth really even bringing into this presentation. I expected the question and to answer it, but it's not the purpose. These batteries are not for resilience. They are for maximizing investments in people and reducing our energy consumption and our costs as much as humanly possible.
So you're basically, you know, if resilience is a priority, you're saying, all right, for the next 10 years, we're holding out on a resilience play, which honestly could, because again, am I right that say you super duper duper oversized it, it still wouldn't give you like 5 days of power
Right.
so that you could sustain a shelter for people who are just flooded or something, like the technology isn't there.
That's right.
So a 10-year play towards resilience might actually be reasonable in the marketplace.
I think the resilience play is, it's not there yet. You're right. It's different. You're approaching this project from a completely different
That's a different
mindset.
strategy.
So like if you're thinking resilience, right?
Right.
Number one, most of these sites probably don't fit that bill.
That's like a library, police station play.
It's a community center of some kind, and I don't mean that it's a community center. It's a place of community, right?
Yeah.
And you don't, I don't want to get into the tangent on that, but you come at that from a completely different angle. And you start with community engagement. You pick that site very carefully. You know, there's a lot more that would go into like building it into a resilience. So I would say that an emergency shelter, for example, right? Different scenario. I don't know that too many of our places would fit that bill just based on where they are. Some of the libraries might. I would start looking at schools.
Yeah.
Middle schools and high schools especially, they have kitchens, they have showers, they have locker rooms, they have,
That are already identified as.
and they're already identified.
They're already in your
So- so-
And if like that, electric school buses, can't that plug into?
Oh, that's where she's going.
And we're putting solar on all of them right now.
And we're doing solar on all of them. So, you know, again, we're talking about our.
So this is a financial management strategy, which is killer. And
It's-
you know, this gives us the tools to also start doing some analysis if we wanted to do resiliency strategies.
Absolutely.
It's more than financial, this first slide tells me that the biggest thing to do for grid reliability for a community would be to add battery storage to important buildings that reduce.
Reduce need to make demand.
Yeah, I mean, again, the solar is a big.
Take this initiative. This is really-
And we'll learn a tremendous amount from doing these initial projects, but can help inform like future, you know,
That is my goal.
future projects. that we do.
Yeah.
We're gonna do all of these.
That really is the goal, right? I want to get our feet wet with this, to start really understanding how to optimize the technology so that we can start having those conversations with our school partners. To understand, if we are putting it in a lot of these schools, how can we also maximize those investments and potentially talk about resilience as well? And they're bigger conversations that are going to take longer.
Okay.
We get there. I mean, that's the goal long term.
I want to keep talking about storage too, but 4 minutes, tell us how you're going to disconnect all the gas lines to all of the buildings.
Yeah, I'm gonna make it. Short person, I'm gonna make it. So, electrification results basically blew all of the economics out. Right, it's not huge, it's a huge surprise. Most of these facilities were simply not designed to be electric, and would require major infrastructure upgrades in addition to the actual equipment. The other part of that is that like electrifying everything, which is a big sort of phrase right now, like by everything. When only 80% of our current generation is actually from renewables, isn't as effective as it sounds today. And that's today.
Which buildings are we talking about?
What's that?
Which buildings are we talking about?
Nothing in specific.
Oh,
at this
okay.
point. Just overall, virtually every building we looked at that wasn't already electric. The costs simply outweigh everything else, right?
To retrofit the building.
Yeah, yeah, and in some cases, it was just physically impossible. This building was like millions of dollars to try and electrify this building. $3 million trying to keep this building. I mean, it's just not built for it. It wasn't designed that way. So you'd have to gut everything. That said, it doesn't mean that we don't start evaluating what are our policies currently. How do we enhance those or change those or add new policies that push us in the direction? Not to mention, say, for example, but that's 5 years old and might have 20 years left. Is that a financially responsible thing to do to pull that out and replace it now versus when it's near the end of its useful life or closer to it, and or it'll last forever if you just keep fixing it. But so I see there being opportunities, right? Our current building policy is LEED gold if it's over 10,000 square feet. But that current policy doesn't say electrical. It doesn't say no new gas. It doesn't say, it just doesn't require us to do gold, but you can still have gas and LEED gold. So I guess my challenge to this group or my hope for this group is that there can be 80 seconds of discussion on if we were to change the policy, if we were to adopt the goals, what would those look like? Would we just call out no new gas period, end of story, for any new construction? Would we say that upon the end of useful life of any equipment, we're going to do a life cycle cost analysis on it? Present that to you guys like we did with the fleet stuff, where the numbers worked, penciled out, we thought you guys should make it all electric, put solar on it, and it was a home run. So, what are some other thoughts you all have?
Yeah.
And
From my perspective, spending tax dollars on a new gas boiler or gas furnace is just a non-starter. Shouldn't be this. Yeah, can't do that because they last, like I said, a long time.
they do. Yeah, it's a significant investment and it's going to be around a long time. Yeah, so we don't have to answer all of these questions. This is the sort of plug I want to put in people's ear to think about. And I did bring copies of our current policy, but most just take it home and peruse over it and think about, again, this is really based, Parker, on the fact that you brought this to us and said that this is the direction I think we should go. And while I'm happy to share with you like the numbers and the analysis on the electrification, all of that stuff, and it's in that dashboard, so maybe.
Yeah. Oh, it is, okay.
It is. I think that personal opinion, policy is how we start moving in that direction, not just gutting buildings and trying to swap things out today. Cost effective, that's just it's kind of a non-starter. I don't know where we get the money anyway, honestly. That's, it's some of these projects would be massive undertaking. So
Well, certainly like this building's so new, I'm sure the gas infrastructure is not that old, but if you have an example of whether it's this building or another one of like what it takes to like replace.
Yeah, and in some cases, it is actually not that bad. So for example, the Health and Human Services building, it's a fairly new building.
Yeah.
But the MEP upgrades for that building were not that expensive. Less than $200,000 or something like that. But it's all fairly new equipment too. It's a new building. So like, is that responsible? Again, those are the questions that we have to answer. Is it responsible to gut a brand new building, put in electrical equipment now versus, I'm sure, again, I'm not trying to answer that question.
Not building ones.
That's exactly, that's exactly. So I just, that's the thoughts I'd like you guys to sort of, have in your mind as you develop recommendations for staff on how you think we should move forward. And I brought Mike here just because I wanted him to hear this. I don't want to sneak up on him with all this stuff. But
Thanks for listening and
doing so much work to move our conversation forward.
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
like informative.
I tell Sybil all the times, I try to read the tea leaves. You know, like, I heard an offhanded comment about that.
I didn't see the Luster Library analysis though, so.
Oh, it's in there. It's in there. I'm happy. I'm saving that one for Terry. I don't want-
On a cloudy day.
All buildings really should come solar on part of the PDD. Instead of an option, it should be required.
He said it, all right.
Yeah, and our current policy does not say that. It says solar ready. Does not say solar installed.
So a
So,
question or a comment? Okay.
yeah, so, you know, Mike makes a good point, and you know, I don't want to call any department out, but like, you know, this policy hasn't been in place for a very long time. We're already seeing departments that are like, well, you know, again, they think first cost before they can. I like to think we're gonna own a building for 50 years, so what I pay today, you know, is not as important as like, what is the cost of this building like, right? And we do still have to get out of that mindset because we have departments going like, well, can we build this to like slightly under 10,000 square feet so that we don't have to do LEED? No, I don't want to, like, let's not do that. Let's not have that conversation. You build what you need. It's just not about trying to get around the policy. Let's do what's necessary to make the right choices. So I don't want to talk more. I'm 3 minutes over, so I've wasted so much. of your time.
What policy did you just hold up to show us?
This is our current LEED policy.
Okay.
So just in case anybody wanted to take it on the way out, so yes, absolutely.
On this page.
Yes, final thoughts on?
You know, we're over time, but like, I mean, those things that you threw out there as possible policies, I mean, they actually all sound like things we probably quickly reach consensus about. I mean, I'm not saying we should do that today because we're over time, but why don't we bring this back, or maybe ask the staff to actually kind of flush this out and bring this back as a policy recommendation. So I think for new buildings, you know, no gas, be electric, look at electrification at end of useful life equipment. And there was one other one. They all sounded like very good policies.
I'll take credit for all of
So
them.
why don't we put those up, why don't we circle back around to those then? Because I think those would be great.
Include the schools in the discussion too? See ya.
Bye.
Like, is it?
Well, it's like I don't think we can necessarily legally like tell them what to do. It's kind of like the solar on the schools. I mean, if we bring in ideas, we're willing to invest in these things and we think they're going to save you money, which directly saves us money because we're paying for all this stuff that you need today. I mean, it sounds like, I mean, this storage stuff could be, yeah, we're not going to do all 40 at one time, but like it could be like a great opportunity. There's got to be probably multiple examples of where it's going to be very attractive there too, as well, if you dig into that, right?
I would think so. Some of the school systems sizes are just so much bigger than the ones that we're doing on our facilities. Now, it's a much higher intensity building as well. And, you know, there are several months out of the year where it's not being used very much at all. So there's some things to factor in. But just based on what I've seen in the months that we've been doing this, I'm certain there would be some pretty attractive projects for the school system. Should we go down that road? I'm just trying to get solar on the schools right now.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, we've got a lot of work to do still to get to that, to like kind of finish that stuff out. But once we do, I think that's a good time to start those conversations.
It's really exciting. Great.
Thanks, Jeremiah.
Great analysis.
Thanks.
Move to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Thank you. I think I've already adjourned.